Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about that part of penetration testing which is as important as any of its other parts. For example, be it reconnaissance or exploitation. Reporting is important, but this is something that is really less talked about. So in this session, we are going to talk about report writing in penetration testing. A report is a critical document, especially in penetration testing. It deals with security critical observations. For that matter, take any cybersecurity engagement, be it security audits, be it source code reviews, be it compromise assessment engagements. The final deliverable will always be a report. Now, summaries of these observations can also be communicated verbally, but then complete and final report is always a written document. Now, we know this from our experience as well. Have we ever seen a situation where our pen test observations were recorded and we have audio stored of it? No, right? The final deliverable will always be a written document. And that is exactly why that when we are working in a dynamic field like penetration testing, it is important that attention, the relevant attention is given to one of the most important phases of penetration testing, that is report writing. So now that the stage has been set, let's get going. So first things first, who am I? My name is Ashwini Varadkar and I am working as a lead quality assurance analyst, fondly the storyteller at Not So Secure. And if I have to summarize my journey, I started my career as a technical writer and cybersecurity analyst, moving ahead to becoming a pen tester, a senior security analyst, and then working as a lead QA in cybersecurity. So since I started my career as a tech writer and I was always passionate about writing, my interest and my passion was also there towards reports. It was natural because I used to love writing. So during report debriefs or while writing pen test reports, if the client did not understand any finding, or be it for any other team member, if the client came back and they needed an explanation, I used to be curious as to why did the client not understand? What did we miss? Or if we have not written it correctly, did we understand the finding? So this curiosity led me to explore report writing more, identify common mistakes, come out with ways in which how report writing could be improved. And as a part of my journey, I paid special attention to different kinds of reports in pen test by various consultants. I have an experience of reviewing reports from various consultants, different years of experiences, different projects, different templates. So in this session, I'm going to utilize my experience and try to put forward whatever I gathered during these years of experience in cybersecurity. So let's get going. Now, since we are talking about reporting in penetration testing, the first thing that we should understand is what is penetration testing or the objective. Now, when I say penetration testing, a lot of people think about vulnerabilities, criticalities, shell access. Fine, fair enough. Penetration testing is a exhilarating domain. But is that the objective? Like discovering vulnerabilities, taking POCs images, and then what? Storing them in a folder? No, right? Do we send across the folder to client? No. So the actual objective is to identify vulnerabilities, report confirmed and validated vulnerabilities. If remediation is part of the scope, write about remedial measures and then send across this report. Now, based on the remedial measures provided, the client will start fixing those vulnerabilities to achieve security. So the ultimate goal of penetration testing is security. Now, if we map penetration testing, the goal of penetration testing to security, we automatically understand that, okay, vulnerabilities are important, but if we cannot communicate and if we are not on one page with the client in terms of vulnerabilities and remedial measures, then there might be a gap in understanding. So the objective of penetration testing is security. Now, just before this session, I did a small survey because I wanted to understand what our fellow pen testers have to say about some questions. For example, I just asked them what is the ultimate goal of pen test. You can see the result here. 66% were correct in guessing security. Obviously, the options are a bit tricky. But if we have to remember, security is the main objective. So then automatically communication skills also comes into the picture. Also, steps of ethical hacking. Now, when as newcomers, we started studying about security, this was the cycle that we were told about, we were explained about, or hacking methodology, ethical hacking cycle. So if we see, reporting is a very important part in this entire process. Now, if you are a freelancer or if you are doing independent pen tests, sometimes it's only from recon to this, and there is reports are important, but when you're in an organization, reporting is a bit different. There are report reviews, there are report debriefs. So there is a process and there is no running away. So this is where reporting stands in penetration testing, in a penetration testing engagement. And that is why we need to understand the objective first and then go towards how we can improve our writing. Now, if you see this question, do you think reporting in your organization is given the attention that it deserves? Now, 55% of people have said no. So this is quite alarming. Now, when I say attention, meaning in terms of training, in terms of review, in terms of a person who's accountable if there is any doubts related to report writing or sentence formation, etc. So this is something really alarming. Now, problem areas, because we are adamant in our likes and more so in our dislikes. See, the first thing towards resolution of a problem is that we need to acknowledge that a problem exists. Now, there is no problem per se, but then report writing is really a highly despised task. If you ask pen testers what is that they don't like in this pen test methodology, they'll say reporting, because it's like it involves a lot of time and you have to write and there is nothing cool or dynamic about it. So the problem statements which I found are additional task. A lot of pen testers consider report writing as an additional task. The fact is, report writing is as important as any other phase. Like I said, reconnaissance, exploitation, any phase. It is a part of pen test. And when we look at reporting, when we consider it as an important part, we automatically feel like investing time in it. If you think of it as an additional task, you might not want to invest time, or you'll be reluctant when any trainings are provided, when any feedback is given. Next, exhilarating domain. Now this is important and I wanted to share. As a newcomer, when we hear about cybersecurity, that we want to make a career in cybersecurity, we immediately think of hacking, then there are cyber crimes, cyber cells, etc. All cool stuffs. But we don't think about communication skills at this stage. Fair enough. As a senior, if I have to switch from some domain to cybersecurity, again, I will think about various certifications and how I can move laterally and change my domain, right? I will think about, again, communication skills there. Fair enough. But what happens is, when they enter into this field and they realize that almost 40 to 50% of their time is going to be invested into reporting, into amendments, as per the changes that are suggested, in report debriefs, communication skills, speaking and writing both. So they find it really different that, okay, oh God, there's a lot of reporting. Can we simply not automate the entire reporting part? We don't want to learn. They're reluctant. There's some kind of a reluctancy towards trying to invest time in report writing. So then, is communication skills more important than the skills that are required for an ethical hacker? No, but then balance is the key. Both are equally important. Now, if we go back to this cycle, there's one more important thing, that from recon to here, the skill set that is required is different. And if you see reporting and debriefs, the skill set that is required here is different. This is communication skills, and these are our technical skill sets which are required for assessments. So this is the thing what I mean by skill sets, that two different skill sets are required. When we say we are a pen tester or a consultant, it is a job that we are also focusing on communication skills, because like we saw, the final two stages are of communication skills. So these are three problem statements that we need to address. And as and when we also start preaching about communication skills, about the importance of reporting, at initial stages or when somebody is trying to enter into this field, they'll be prepared that this is something that they need to learn. And gradually we'll see a day that reporting will be like everybody will be good in reports and in speaking because they already have been preparing themselves, gaining technical knowledge and also working on communication skills. Now, the need for good report writing. So if you are really good in identifying vulnerabilities and you have found critical vulnerabilities, there are chaining of attacks and everything. But if you cannot transfer this knowledge correctly to the reader, your knowledge will be limited to you. So this is completely your loss because you have studied something, but you're not able to put forth your story to the reader. So because of this, your knowledge, your hard work is restricted to you. Second point is good impression. Now, suppose you're reading a report that has a lot of spelling mistakes, incoherent sentences, like sentences from which any meaning cannot be derived. By seeing such reports, you will doubt the credibility of that report. Even though it is technically accurate, you will still doubt. For that matter, imagine you're getting an email from a legitimate source and there are a lot of spelling mistakes, inconsistencies with regards to cases. The first thing that you will think is that a phishing email? You will, right? So this is a thing, a bad report will affect your image, your impression as well. So when you're investing time in reporting, it is also for your own self, for knowledge transfer, and also that your report is considered and it is really decently received by the reader. Now, again, this is yet another alarming thing. Do you personally like reporting? People don't like reporting. Again, I think if we go back to the problem statements that they think it is an additional task, but it's very much a part of pen test. And I'm sure gradually there'll be a change. Tech writing versus content writing. This is one beautiful thing that I learned from a mentor. Difference between tech writing and content writing. Now, when it's penetration testing, it comes under tech writing. Okay. Now, this is some comparison that I did on 3 factors only. The first factor is style. Okay. So the style for technical writing will be formal on technical topics, content writing, informal on non-tech topics, right? The vocabulary here is professional and for technical audience, here general, evocative. Technical writing is to inform, instruct. Content writing, inform, entertain, right? So if you see technical writing sounds like it's something very strict, official, and content writing, free-flowing, poetic kind of. But if you go by this definition and if you write technical writing as per these points, you will fail. You cannot just spit facts at readers. They need to be told a story. So for a good technical writing, these 2 points in red from content writing needs to be embedded. Technical writing can be emotional. Technical writing is technical storytelling. You can entertain people via your technical write-ups. So this is very important, that technical writing is really not that strict as it sounds. And once you understand this, that it's all about technical storytelling, keeping things simple, you will enjoy technical writing or pen test report writing. Now that we understand that penetration testing can be free flowing too, just we need to keep some simple things in mind, like not to use jargons or internet words. Keep it simple, decent, and there you get your technical write-up. Now let's dissect a penetration testing report. Now I have divided the report into 2 parts. Of course, there are other parts in a report, like executive summary, there might be appendices. So the 2 key parts that I have identified are the proof of concept and risk rating. Now the proof of concept is a key part because this is where you talk about vulnerabilities. The readers will refer to this if they have to reproduce the attack, correct? And this is one part which cannot be automated. So the real writing, the real storytelling happens at this section. And the other important key part is the risk rating. You organize your findings as per risk rating. Now, be it qualitative risk assignment, or numerical scores based on CVSS or any other method that you use. So risk rating will allow you to arrange your findings, and the proof of concept is the evidence that a vulnerability existed when you tested that particular asset. And it's a proof, evidence. So these are the two key parts, and the other parts like description, mitigation. Now, why mitigation is not in key part? Because sometimes for pen test engagements, mitigation might not be compulsory. It depends upon the scope and what was agreed upon. Mitigation at a high level can be reused. Even description. Now, when I say description, it is description of a vulnerability. Mostly we write a generic description, like suppose SQL injection. Then we talk about SQL injection. We talk about lack of input validation in the description itself, impact that it will have. So if you have already written a description of SQL injection for any client, you may reuse that part. Mitigation also at a high level can be reused. Then depending upon the client and the circumstances, you can make some changes. But other than that, a lot of content can be reused or you can automate it, right? So the actual writing or the challenges faced by pen testers, if we see, is in the proof of concept section. So we are going to talk about how proof of concept can be framed, how we can frame sentences by using various ways. And this will also help you with the description as well. But since description is a generic part and not very challenging, we will focus on proof of concept for this session. Now, if you see here, the question was, do you write a lot of reports? So yes, but there are some places where the reports are completely automated. Okay. Now for this session, I have created a formula. Report writing will be storytelling plus immediate takeaways. Now, storytelling and immediate takeaways are basically two sections in this PPT, in this session. So when I say storytelling, it is going to be all about writing. And writing takes time. You will start writing, you will gather feedback. You will work upon all the changes that are suggested to you, and gradually you will improve your storytelling or writing. But immediate takeaways, these are some basic points which you can immediately start implementing in your technical write-ups. Now, decent writing and storytelling and these basic pointers together will definitely ensure that 60 to 70% of your work is done. Now, remaining 40 to 30% work will be done by reviewers. When you get a different perspective or an input on your reports, you automatically get good quality points and your work is done. Like 80 to 90% work is done there because someone is reviewing it. And when we spend a lot of time in our reports, there'll be a point that we cannot find any mistakes in it. Fair enough. The power of fresh perspective is really great. The storytelling and immediate takeaways and reviewing, a very important part of report writing process, will ensure that you have a good quality report with you. So like I said, storytelling will take time. So first, let's understand the immediate takeaways. Now you can also have a checklist in place. You can note down the points like, okay, as in when you check one points, I mean, once you write your report, you can check then if these basic pointers were ensured in the report. Now the first point is getting the names right. Now, just like how our names are official and defined, the name of a software, tool, attack, parameters, our organization name, client organization name, these are all official and defined, and in no way should we change those. Now, the best way to understand the official names for the tools or attacks or parameters is to check official websites. Whatever is written there, you can use it in your reports. For example, jQuery, not jQuery with small q. Clickjacking like this is wrong. Now CSRF token, if in request the developers have written CSRF token like this, please do not change it to CSRF token, small t, or CSRF space token. Now, if you observe, the later looks like an English word, Like we are talking about CSRF token in the request. That's it. But not the CSRF token, the token's name. So this is important. Even attacks like poodle, it's an abbreviation. So you need to write it like that. These small important things, if you take care initially, during reviews, a lot of time will be saved. Another important point is images or screenshots. Images or screenshots are used as evidence in reports. They support your proof of concept and helps client reproduce the issue. Now, images are really important. One, because just imagine if there's a report having only descriptive lines and no image. It will be very difficult for you also to paste your output to show the client of the exact scene that happened when you executed a command. So description and images together enables readers to understand better what had happened and the folders that you visited and how the output or the error looked. Also, there is one more thing that images are important. It is important for a consultant or a tester as well. Sometimes, suppose there are 2-3 pen testers testing one asset, and suppose a tool is giving you a different output or an IP is unavailable to you. So when you attach a screenshot, it gives readers the idea that, oh, okay, really at that point of time, this tool did not work as expected with you, or an IP was not really available. So it's a proof for yourself as well, and when any issue is found for the clients as well. Now the basic checks related to images that you should take care. Alignment. Consistency is the key. If you have aligned your image towards the left, ensure all your images are aligned towards the left or center, whatever. Consistency is the key here. Clarity, the image should be clear. Now, it may so happen that the font size on the terminal might be really small. So when you take the entire page, the image will automatically become smaller and it may be unreadable. So clarity is important. Even the terminals of some tools or some operating systems are like transparent, so the backend folders are visible. So ensure that you have a correct setting and relevant highlights. Some tool outputs give a lot of some tools give a lot of output, like there'll be a huge page. So if the page is important, you can paste it, but ensure that you are highlighting relevant points so that the reader is automatically directed towards those highlights and they don't have to search, okay, what is to be seen here? If you say some old version has been detected, so where is it? Because there's a lot of write-up, a lot of content, numbers, versions, license information, there could be anything. So highlights are important. Apart from that, highlights are important, masking is important. Now, if your POC is about hashes or passwords, even though you are sharing it with your client, there are many stakeholders in the client organization as well. So in order to keep their privacy, mask those hashes or passwords, because we don't want anybody to understand the pattern of it. We can have internal malicious actors, right? So it's best that you mask hashes so that nobody is able to make sense out of it. Another reason masking is important is, like, suppose you are capturing your entire desktop screen and by mistake there's a folder about some other client. So you don't want to give that information, or if there is any personal information or bookmarks and you don't want to reveal that. So ensure that correct things are masked before you are submitting your report. Again, these are basic things that you can, if you have a checklist, I think it will be easier. You can take that, okay, alignment has been reviewed. For self-review, you can make a checklist of these immediate takeaway points. Now, highlights and emphasis. Okay, so in cybersecurity, we come across various terms which mean differently in English language and in cybersecurity engagements. For example, when we say a cookie was not secure, okay, now if you're talking to a fellow pen tester, he will immediately understand that you're talking about insecure cookie transmissions. But if you have written it just like this, a reader will think that you're talking about a cookie which is not secured, that is, it is not protected. That's it. But if you add a single quote over here for secure, if you add a single quote, you're automatically stressing that this is not ordinary secure term. We are trying to say something else. We are talking about the attribute secure. So this message automatically gets delivered if you use highlights and emphasis in a proper way. Another example I can think of is a tool called Eyewitness. So if you say using Eyewitness, you did XYZ. So if there are no highlight of some kind, or if you don't add this term tool, so eyewitnesses also means human beings, human being eyewitness as a proof of concept. So highlights and emphasis is important. Now you can use bold, italics, single, double quotes. Again, consistency is the key here. If you have started with bold, use that throughout. Single quotes, then single quotes. Avoid using underlines because underlines will give it a flavor of a link, or even color codes, like sometimes you're using red, green. The readers might not know of the color codes. So avoid colors, and you can stick to these options. And again, you can make a habit, like if you are writing a report anytime, it will be bold only always, so that there is no confusion and you will automatically get that hang of consistency as well. So this is why highlights and emphasis are important. Even for that matter, codes, scripts, if you are appending code or code snippets in your report, you may want to use a different form so that the reader understands immediately, okay, this looks like a request captured in any tool maybe. So you get that effect that, okay, this is something different. This is a script. So use these things. Even for payload, you can use a different font. Suppose if there's a URL and in the URL, there's an affected parameter and you have appended your payload. So try to give a different format to the payload so that just by looking at it, you know, this is not something regular, not a part of the URL. So these are things that you should definitely implement in your reports. Case consistency, another basic simple thing that you can immediately start taking care of. The titles, subtitles, or figure captions must have case consistency. Now, either all the titles are like this, like the first letter is capital, or the first letter is capital and the first letter of second word is not. So this consistency is also important. Be it titles, subtitles, or figure captions, the same rules apply. Now imagine if you don't take care of this and if you get a feedback that please ensure consistency. This is going to be extremely time consuming later on. So you might have to note this initially. Again, like I said, make your own checklist and just decide that this is what you are going to stick to no matter what report you write. So these are some of the immediate takeaways that you can immediately start implementing. Apart from this, there are some points like not using ampersand for formal writings. It's not wrong, nobody will highlight that, but we can avoid ampersand. Using etc. a lot. You can end it like this, like X, Y, and Z, such as X, Y, and Z. So when we say such as X, Y, and Z, we are automatically implying that there could be more, such as this, this, and this. So you should avoid etc. if possible. So these are some simple things that you can avoid in your writing. Okay, coming to storytelling, this is where we are going to talk about writing, and in pen test reports, proof of concept section is the section where storytelling happens. And this is one part which cannot be automated. This will be different as per different situations, different clients. You can automate the description of vulnerabilities or remedial measures, but storytelling, you have to do it. There is like no running away from it. Now, as a part of that survey, there was one question: which section in the report do you find challenging? So if you see POC, a lot of people had troubles with POC, description, impact. There were a lot of more responses, all geared towards POC. So yes, of course, POC, because vulnerabilities can get complicated, and explaining this to readers can be challenging. Okay, so before anything, we need to understand the concept of proof of concept. Now, this line is important. Penetration testing is a proof of concept based approach of finding vulnerabilities. So it's a proof of concept based approach, not exploitation based. Exploitation does not happen always. For some reason, we are required to do non-intrusive testing, right? For sometimes, due to time constraints, we cannot exploit a vulnerability fully. So pen testing is a proof of concept based approach. Okay. So what is a proof of concept? So proof of concept is basically where our focus is towards determining whether an idea or a concept can be turned into reality. It might not be complete, but can this be developed, modified further into a wholesome attack? Correct? So this is proof of concept. Now the main purpose of POC is to demonstrate the vulnerability and to verify a certain concept or theory that can be achieved in development. Now proof of concept means different in different domains, okay? Like software testing, POC versus prototypes, there is a different argument right there. In cybersecurity, like I said, whether an idea can be converted to reality, this is the key point here. Now, I did not think of this really deeply when I started, but I was just going through some exploit codes and I wanted to determine scores, okay? So I saw that some public exploits were rated as high, okay? So the description associated with high was that the exploit code is functional, it works in all the situations, publicly available, and plus there are automated tools available for it, or the code is written in such a way that it can be automated. So it was most harmful. Then I saw if high exploit code is functional in every situations, then what is functional exploit code? So the functional exploit was described in just one line, that functional exploit code works in most of the situations. That's it. So basically this was high, but high always worked, could be automated. Functional worked in most of the situations, not always. Okay. Then there was something called as the exploit code was just proof of concept based. So meaning it was not 100% and a lot of modifications were to be required from the testers or consultants end. So when I read about the difference between these three terms, that is when I realized, okay, so proof of concept is in itself a different concept, and yes, this is what it means. So when I was exploring about exploit codes, I came to know the deep meaning of proof of concept. Again, it reminds me that now since proof of concept is might not really be wholesome, a lot of low and informational vulnerabilities should be reported, because we are talking about development here. Like today we are not able to exploit, but tomorrow this idea can be exploited. So anything you feel can become a big issue tomorrow should be reported. So that is what a proof of concept is. Now the target audience. This will determine an important part of writing. So when you say client, it's never one entity when it's pen test profession, but an entire organization involving various stakeholders. Some of the various stakeholders are as below: senior management, technical and non-technical. Now, since this is a senior management and since we are talking about security of our own organization, security posture, I think everybody will be interested. So when we say security senior management, it can be technical and non-technical. So that is your first audience there. Then we have developers. Because if a web application has been developed by a developer, it is them who should know about the flaws, and the remedy is going to be implemented by the developers. So yes, the developers must understand the vulnerability and also the remedial measures in clarity so that they can make those changes in their product or their application. Then we have our fellow pen testers. Now, suppose for some reason you cannot continue your pen test, or you might not be able to give report debriefs or anything. So your fellow pen testers will take that ahead. Or if you have been working in teams, then your pen testers may continue your project. Like for example, you wrote the report, but someone else is going to present. So your fellow pen testers will refer your report. Okay. So this is one audience who should understand whatever you have written. Now, pen testers could be in our organization and in target organization as well. So this is the third audience that is going to read your pen test report. And of course, auditors who refer pen test reports as a part of audit, like if there is annual audit, annual pen tests, biannually pen tests, and if there is a criteria for some certification, then they will want to see. Of course, they are not going to refer it in deep, but they will go through it. So this is your fourth audience who's going to refer to your pen test report. Now, if you observe, they are technical people. Except for the non-tech senior management, everybody is technical, but their level of technical competency is different. So here your challenge is to effectively educate all these stakeholders at their level. And you are going to be delivering only one report. So you need to be damn sure that your report is written in such a way that all these readers are going to make sense out of it. Okay. So a single document that is of beneficial to these people who are technical, but they have different technical competency. Now, what is the common element that will allow you to write a report which is understood by all these stakeholders? So that is simplicity. A simple writing cuts thick skulls. So when you write in the most basic way, that is easier for you as a writer, and everybody can make sense out of it. So simple writing it is. When it's pen testing, you have to ensure that you are basic and there are no shortcuts, and you just write all the steps. Now, using plain English. Now, I didn't know about this concept before, but recently I came across this plain English. Now, plain English is a language which asks the writers to use only as many words as necessary. So we achieve plain English by using everyday words. It is the simplest form of writing. The idea is to allow readers to only focus on the message instead of being distracted by jargons, any complicated phrases, or any complication. For example, if you want to write some word and you are writing a formal document and then you check for synonyms, then you're complicating it. Plain English is all about keeping things really simple. Now, I would really suggest that you all read more about plain English. There are also campaigns wherein which people are trying to rewrite highly official documents, be it government and all, in simple language so that a layman can understand. So this is the whole objective of plain English. Plus, plain English makes good business sense, and you might want to read, and this will help you greatly when writing pen test reports, because we do have findings which are really complicated. And if you stick to plain English, because pen test reports are formal reports, so we end up thinking that, okay, do we want to use some hi-fi words? No. Plain English is all about using simple languages, everyday words, and it is used in business documents as well. So this is something that you should definitely explore more. Now, sentence construction. We all talk about different ways, like read so that your writing improves, speak so that your writing improves. But to improve writing, you write and you get it reviewed so that you get feedback, and you again write, and this is the only way how you can improve your writing. So now, if we are talking about POC writing or storytelling, sentence construction is important. So one of the most important part in sentence construction that greatly helps me is mind maps. Now, when I say mind maps, I'm not talking about any tool on the system, like using your mouse, dragging from here to there. Of course, when the complication is high and if your mind maps is going to be really, really big, then you cannot do it offline. Then you need tools. But then, pen and paper, the power of pen and paper, doodles is really underrated. So what I feel is no matter what the attack is, if I have a whiteboard or a notepad in front of me, before starting to frame POC POC statements or sentences, what I do is I just start doodling. Okay, now I've got IDOR. What was the action? Okay, password could be changed. Since it's IDOR, what was the exposed parameter or the insecure object? ID parameter. Okay, was authentication required? You write your yes, no. Now, if you also got something related to privileges, like if you could escalate privileges, then talk about the user that you used to sign into an account, to sign into the application. So you write here user A with low privileges. Then ID of user A was changed to that of B, and B had high privileges. So, make these star marks and make doodles. Now, if you see this is not an order. It's okay if you have not followed a particular stepwise order. But once you have this in front of you, you can refer to it and then decide. Okay, the first step should be user A with low privileges. So you can say that the tester signed into the application with the role of user A, which had low privileges. So this is how you can frame sentences. This you can also do in the report itself. Like before starting the POC section, just make bullet points. This was the issue. This is important to this finding, like IDOR. So first is, what is that direct object? Note that URL, affected parameter. What could be done? So mind maps and doodling's rough work greatly helps in sentence construction. This is really important. So what happens is when you have this in place, you can simply slowly frame sentences around it. Your job becomes a lot easier rather than, just seeing the screenshots, and if everything is in your mind, it's difficult. Okay, what had happened? So first you can have a rough work and then make it fair. Another important point is dictionary. Now, if you're using MS Word or any other tool, any other software, so like for example in Word, XYZ was able to do something. So was able to will automatically get a red line below it. So that will be replaced by could, correct? In order to gets replaced by to. So there are these things. Use the power of computers. You can have various tools for spell checks, dictionary. Keep it on and just see the suggestions. Now if you're using plain English, you're already writing in the most basic language, and with this suggestions you'll get a good decent sentence right there. So use dictionaries and everything that is easily available. Then we have tenses. Now the tense for any verb is its setting in that time. Okay, now first you need to decide whether your proof of concept is going to be in past tense, present tense or future tense. Then you stick to that decision, ensure consistency, and only change if there is a need for that tone to change. Mixed tenses are allowed, but depends upon the situation. Now, if you see this sentence, it was discovered that the application used an outdated version of XYZ, which is vulnerable. So it was discovered, which is vulnerable to CVE, whatever. Okay. Now here, if you say which was vulnerable, no, that vulnerability is like kind of forever. There was a version of XYZ software and it is vulnerable to this CVE. A CVE ID has been assigned and this is going to be forever. So when the reader reads, for him, it will be like when the testing was done in the past, it was discovered that an application used an outdated version of XYZ, which is vulnerable, because when he is reading it, even that time, this fact will hold true. So this is the thing about tenses. Nothing complicated. First you decide, majorly it's past or present only. And mixed tenses are allowed. And how you decide upon mixed tenses is with this. Is that thing true today? Then that will be in present tense. Think from a reader's perspective. Then this is reading out loud. Like when you frame sentences, carefully craft your sentences, and then when you read out loudly, what happens is, as per the punctuation, you will pause and you will speak. So when you're speaking, when you're reading out loud, any glitch that your eye could not catch, your toning or your pauses will immediately highlight you. If there is any change or if there is any disconnect, you will find that out by reading your sentences loudly. Okay, that glitch, you will immediately catch that. So once you have doodled, start to frame sentences. If you're using Word or any tools, whatever, you'll get suggestions. Use that. Simply don't invest time in, specifically finding flaws. Whatever is highlighted, it's fine. You can make that change at that point of time. Tenses, decide. I think if you are in an organization, then this must have already been decided, like your proof of concepts are from in the past tense. But if it's your choice, then again, make a checklist for yourself that all your POCs going ahead are going to be like this. So then this gets sorted, and read out loud whatever you write so that anything that your eye could not capture, your sound will. Now, rule of thumb. So think of any finding. How do you make mind maps? You need to determine what is important to a particular vulnerability. Like we saw IDOR, insecure direct object. So what is that object? First thing should be IDOR object. Okay, then you can write about that affected parameter. Then another thing important about IDOR would be if you could get privilege escalation. Write about that, because this is, after all, we are talking about broken access control here. So you jot down points which are important to a particular vulnerability. If it were CSRF, then victim authentication would have been important. This again depends upon the user accounts that you were provided for the test. The user that you used as a victim and as an attacker. You need to determine all that roughly. Then a context in short. Now for findings like IDOR and CSRF, if there are 6 to 7 steps involved, like we said, we have to stick to simplicity, no shortcuts. And if you are using plain English, then there could be even more steps since we are explaining everything. So the reader should not wait till your 8th or 9th step to understand what happened. So you can provide a context in short that the application was vulnerable to IDOR, and this allowed the tester to escalate privileges and get account takeover as the final output. So give a context in short so that the readers know in advance what is to be expected. User accounts and privileges provided. This is important. If authentication is important to exploit any vulnerability. So you need to talk about that, about the user accounts and privileges provided. And especially for findings like IDOR, CSRF, privileges are important, like the user that you used or the user account you used to sign into the application and then you initiated the attack. So talk about that. Then there is modification, the modification that you did. Suppose ID was set to 1 and you changed it to 2. Talk about this modification. What was changed from what to then what? Was brute force used, like automatically it was changing, and then you got so many responses, and in one response you identified that, okay, this was an admin account or something. So you talk about that. Then again, final outcome. What could be achieved? If account takeover, then you better show them that you could sign in, show them that interface. So this is the thumb rule. Before writing, determine these things. What is important to a particular vulnerability, provide a context in short, and then steps depending upon these questions, these pointers. Now suppose we are taking the example of IDOR. Now what is important to this finding? This is important to create mind maps. Like what could happen? You could change a user's password. You could gain admin's account. So you need to determine that, note it somewhere. Then what was the affected parameter and user privileges. So these are basically these questions. Okay, so for IDOR, you answer those questions and make a rough note of it or mind maps of it. Now, suppose this is the situation. Any user could change the password of other user. Affected parameter was ID. So how would you write the proof of concept for this finding, this issue? The mind maps would look something like this. The main action, password change possible. This was the object. Authentication was required. User A with low privileges. This was the modification done. ID was changed. ID of A was changed to that of B, and B had high privileges. So instead of A, password of B was changed when the request was submitted. Due to this, the tester could get the access of B user's account. So this is just rough work. And then you frame sentences around it, okay? So this is your context. That it was identified that web application was vulnerable to IDOR. The affected parameter was ID, and by changing it, any application user could change password of other user. This is the basic context. So in case a reader or some senior management doesn't want to read the steps, he'll be satisfied with this paragraph that, okay, this was the vulnerability and this happened. Then you can further demonstrate the vulnerability for anybody like developers, your fellow pen testers, any technical person from the client organization who wants to understand the vulnerability in depth. So this is step 1. Tester signed in as user A, a low privileged user, and clicked on changed password to change this user's password. Now a low privileged user is important because in this case we did get access of a high privileged user. And if you were provided a low privileged user before testing, then you need to mention about it. Normally people just directly start that the tester clicked on change password to change user's password. Okay, but this is really important, that during testing, what was the role that you assumed? Correct? So first step should be about that. The tester signed in as user A, a low privileged user. Then you talk about interception of that request. Tester intercepted this change password request in a proxy or any proxy tool and observed that there was an ID parameter in the request. So here you talk about the main part of IDOR vulnerability, the insecure object, and it was in the request of change password action. Then the tester changed A user's ID parameter to that of B user, a high privileged user provided for testing purpose. Okay, and the request was submitted or forwarded. Step 4 should be, it was observed that the request was accepted by the server and the password of user B instead of A was changed. In this way, tester who signed in as A user got account access of B user via an insecure direct object reference, that is in the password change request. So if you see, this is the most simplest and the basic way in which in 4 steps we completed IDOR's POC. So the moral of the story is you need to stick to basics, and if anybody reads it, they will understand this finding. And stick to the thumb rule. Talk about what is important, like object. In IDOR, the object is important. So where did you find that? So mention all that. Then again, A user's ID parameter was changed to that of B user, a high privileged user provided for testing purpose, so that the readers understand that, okay, 2 user accounts were provided. So these are some important things that you can simply put. Of course, these steps are to be supported with images so that the user, along with description and with images, they will understand it better. There are images will come here after every step. Now, don't combine 2-3 steps. Don't miss out on POCs. Now, sometimes what happens is people may directly start with step 3. That tester changed A user's ID parameter to that of B. Not wrong, but then if you go stepwise, it's easier for anybody to understand. A technical person will understand from step 3 as well. But the main point, like we saw, was simplicity. So you break it up at the lowest level possible. And if needed, if you think and if your reviewer suggests that step 1 and step 2 can be combined, then do that. But the first time, go as go to the lowest level as possible so that at least the reviewer also understands. Then maybe you all can decide upon combining sentences and everything. Now for IDOR kind of vulnerabilities, avoid merging everything in one step. Do not directly give the image of the final step or the second step. For example, you have 4 steps and you're just showing the final step. No, try to give POCs or screenshots at every step. Remember, simplicity is the key. Again, now if we have to talk about CSRF, so remember the thumb rule. What is important to this finding? Make mind maps. Victim user and the attacker user. Now, if you have been given 2 users, which was the victim user and the attacker user? The attacker user here will be the tester. Okay. Now, if authentication was authentication is a must for CSRF, so you did sign in using some user account, correct? And if you're using that user account to target another user that was provided, so you are the attacker. So the first important point is that you signed in to the application using user A, who's the attacker for this demonstration. Then you talk about the HTML POC or the script, because CSRF is one attack where social engineering will be required if you want to compromise the victim user, because there has to be some way that you send a malicious URL or a malicious payload to the victim and they have to click on that link for some action or an unintended activity to happen, correct? So talk about the HTML POC, show them the raw HTML POC, show them that, okay, XYZ was set to true and you changed it to false. Show them that. Tell the readers that when any user clicks on this HTML page, their account will be changed. Whatever was set to true will be to false. So this is important that you describe the HTML POC or any other script that you're using for CSRF exploitation. There has to be a line about that. Then you talk about the modification that happened, password change, then password change, and final outcome like account takeover or whatever that you could achieve. So now if I had to do CSRF mind map, so here is CSRF, then first thing that comes to our mind, token. Absent, was there no token, or there was a token but it was invalidated? So these are the 2 questions. You can just make a rough note about here, roughly. Then what happened, like password change, user you signed in as, and the privileges. If user accounts were provided, what were their privileges? Was there any kind of privilege escalation? If yes, then this point is important. Then you talk about modification and how you did it, HTML or any script. You can further go down that HTML setting of XYZ was true, changed to false. Who was the victim user and what were his privileges? And social engineering aspects. If you're normally, people don't write about social engineering as a part of CSRF POC because then it will become longer. Like we directly show the HTML page with the submit button and the action happens. But if you want to write, you can go ahead, like the link was sent via an email to any employee. Like if fixed user accounts are not provided and if you have to target any employees, then maybe you can talk about this. And then the final outcome. So again, these are not the perfect steps. These are just mind maps, like token, absent, invalidated. Depending upon the reality, you keep this notepad or this page in front of you and start framing sentences. So like we said, context is important. Tester identified that the web application was vulnerable to CSRF. The issue allowed an application user to change contact preference of another user. This was the context in short. The senior management would like to know. Then you demonstrate the vulnerability in detail. Tester signed in as user A, the attacker in this case. The contact preference page of user A can be seen in figure below. SMS is their preferred contact. Okay. So here, since we are talking about contact preferences, it could be SMS, it could be emails, anything. And this particular user A, had SMS as their preferred contact. Then tester as user A, that is attacker, created an HTML page which when accessed by any application user will cause their contact preferences to be modified. Note that the victim user must be authenticated to the affected application. So you can add this important note as a part of step. So HTML POC or the appendix. So if your HTML POC is a very small code, or you can take a code snippet, which is important one, and paste it. Or if your code is really big, move it to the appendix and then redirect user to that appendix. So once you paste the code snippet here, you can give a note or write such a paragraph that notice in the HTML code that the value of input type SMS is true. This means that when the victim clicks on this HTML page, the contact preference will be updated to SMS. Okay, like any victim who clicks. Now, tester signs in as user B, who has email as his preferred contact. Now, when B accesses the above HTML page created by malicious actor A and submits it, the contact preference of B gets updated and SMS is selected as a preferred contact for B. Okay, so this is how you can simply explain everything, keeping simplicity in mind and considering the target audience, which is varied for pen test reports. This is something really important, like you talk about HTML code and the value that is already there. And if SMS is set to true, you can change it to false or whatever. You can add a new type also maybe here if there are advanced attacks. So this is something you need to think about and write so that the readers understand everything correctly and in detail. Step 4 could be you can talk about anything you are sure of, like token invalidation or token missing, depending upon the true situation. Now here we just updated the contact. Suppose change password was also happening. If the token was not invalidated, then you can talk about that as well. Or like I said, proof of concept might not be 100% a perfect exploit code. So as a step 4, talk about possibilities that this could also happen, or anything that you feel can happen by using automated tools or just by a little tweaking here and there. So this was CSRF. CSRF is also one vulnerability which is really difficult as a pen testers for us also to understand at the initial levels. So we should understand that if we found it difficult to understand CSRF correctly, it will be difficult for the readers as well. So keeping this in mind, you need to be as simple as possible. And when you're writing simply, it's also a test of your knowledge, that if you have understood a concept clearly, you will be able to write it in the most simplest way. Now moving towards common mistakes. First is assumptions in technical understanding. For example, user enumeration. Now sometimes what happens is there's just this much. The application responded with a verbose error message, and they mentioned the message here when an invalid email address was provided in the username field and the screenshot. Just that's it, and this is username enumeration. So don't assume that the reader will understand what the real issue was. Now in such case, you could have also provided a POC for valid email address. Like when there are invalid entries submitted, the server responds like this, and when they are valid, the server responds in a different way. So by these differing responses is what we realized that we could determine valid and invalid usernames of an application. So don't assume that the reader will understand just because you understood. So this is one point where people skip steps, and this is like not simple. So you can elaborate so that if the reviewer suggests that you can merge, like I said, then go for merging. But from your part, as a first writer, go as deep as possible. Lack of completeness, again going against simplicity. Lack of a screenshot. Suppose you have directly talked about step number 3 from IDOR, suppose, and that's the only screenshot in between, and there are no screenshots. So, images enhance a reader's understanding. And if your steps or if the images are abruptly ending, see, even without descriptive lines, the POC, the images in itself should be somewhere enough for an For anybody who's going to reproduce the issue, for them it's easier. It should be easy for them. So a missing screenshot is definitely not a good sign. Ensure you're giving screenshots for all the steps. Because even without sentences, the screenshots in itself should be sufficient to some extent. Then we have half knowledge. If we are talking about extreme options and missing headers, but we are not talking about clickjacking, and your remediation talks about clickjacking. Okay, so the finding is missing security headers, and your remediation is reused and it has mentions of clickjacking, and you're just half talking about extreme options being misconfigured. So you ensure that you are checking everything, and if you're talking about something that can also lead to another vulnerability, then ensure you have mentions of those, because these are some things that some other tester might mention in their reports. So then what happens is you are like, it seems that you have not done the testing completely, or there's something missing, it's immediately highlighted. So read the descriptions, whatever is coming automatically, ensure that if there are mentions, you have a note around it. Suppose extreme options was not correctly configured and it was not vulnerable to clickjacking also. So in such situations, add a note that though this was there, this was tested, but it was not vulnerable to clickjacking. So something of this sort. Make your vulnerability wholesome and ensure that there are checks related to other vulnerabilities which can arise from the base vulnerability. Awkward transitions, if there are chaining of attacks, and if you have ended something like using username enumeration, you got valid usernames, and now you're moving towards brute force because there is also weak password policy. So there are chances that using the valid email address, you can easily crack maybe a user's password and get through. So when you are transitioning from username enumeration to insufficient anti-automation or lack of rate limiting or brute force, or even mentioning about weak password policies. So there should be a systematic flow in this. Again, you can use mind maps that first this happened and then you realized that there was a weak password policy. So you should be checking about this as well. So ensure that the transitions are smooth, and again, you don't miss out on anything, because then it can get complicated for the readers. Wrong choice of words. Now, sometimes discovery is fine, like username discovery, no. So then username enumeration, because you could enumerate the list of those directories or usernames, and some things you discover. So choice of words is also important. When you say a particular issue was exploited, then ensure that it was actually exploited and not just simply confirmed. Confirmed and exploited, again, that's a different topic. So choice of words is also important, what you're saying. And if you recollect the basic points, the immediate takeaways that we talked about, now those should not be a part of common mistakes. Come on. So getting a tool name wrong, everything, this happens. But these are some really important mistakes which we have highlighted. And now that you know of the immediate takeaways, ensure that those mistakes are not repeated by you in your pen test report. Now, reviewing is a very important part of reporting process. Now, when you invest a lot of time in your report, sometimes you may not find mistakes in it, but when a person freshly sees it, the power of peer review is tremendous. So when someone freshly sees it, he will immediately catch errors, be it technical, be it language wise. So reviews are really important. And reviews take time. There should be someone who is dedicated to this work, that they are reviewing your reports. This will help you, this will give you really good insights. So ensure you get your report reviewed before you send it to the client. Keep a checklist from all the points that we have gathered. Make a checklist. And if you are doing a self-review, then ensure that there's a huge gap of time between when you complete the report and when you are reviewing it, so that you also review it with a fresh mind. So this is important. Reviewing is important. Training. Report writing is an essential element of practice for all professions. Anybody who wants to improve their level of skills must seek specialist training in these areas, in addition to obvious advances within the profession. Communication skills are important, and if you feel you want to do upgrade yourself, if you feel now that you have the required technical skill sets and you're doing good, then you may want to move towards improving your communication skills. And if you think you need guidance, then definitely take trainings, because like we said, in all professions, communication skills and the core skill sets, balance is the key and both are important. So think about getting trained. And this was one question, would you rather? So yes, people prefer pen testers with pen testing skills and communication skills, even if a tester is extremely good. Even if they hire them, they will have to train that person. So yes, all this matters. And the conclusion, if you have to summarize everything, reporting is a part of pen test, an important part of pen test. Technical writing is simple and evocative. It is emotional. Proof of concept section is the heart of a pen test report, which cannot be automated, and this is where your real storytelling skills come into the picture. Use creativity like mind maps, doodling, and frame sentences easily around it. And reviewing is important because it will give you more ideas and proper inputs. So yes, this was all from my end about reporting in penetration testing. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you.